Hi, friend. I am so excited that you are joining us for episode 3 of the Live Well with Josie podcast. I really hope that you are getting extremely excited for the holidays. I know I am. I will be heading back to Ohio to visit some family members and have Christmas with them there. Unfortunately, my husband's in the Navy, so we will not be spending the holidays together as he has to work, but that's the price we have to pay as a military family. If you are a military family, please let me know because I would love to get in contact with you and, how important it is to have that community within this space as well. Anywho, I am extremely excited to introduce today's guest to you. His name is Sam Ingersoll, and he is the marketing manager of one of my favorite dairy companies, Kalona SuperNaturals. Sam joined me on this episode to discuss all things regenerative farming, in which he is very knowledgeable. We also discuss the importance of supporting local small farmers and why regenerative farming is so important and how it actually is a technique that has been utilized for many, many, many years. As you enter this conversation, please have an open mind and know that no matter what, I support you and whatever you do to provide for yourself and your family as well. Coming from a very small town in Ohio, I support local farms and local families and small businesses as much as possible. And I think that no matter what, we're all just doing the best we can. But today's information is such an eye-opener and really gives me hope for regenerating our earth in the way that God intended it to be. So without further ado, please enjoy today's episode. Welcome to the Live Well with Josie podcast, a space for women like you to enter with an open mind and heart and leave feeling empowered to live your best life full of intention. Here, we learn together and we grow together. Enjoy today's episode. Hi, Sam. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We are so excited to have you here talking all things Kalona SuperNatural, dairy, regenerative farming, and just learning and growing together. This is what our podcast is all about. It's just learning more information, or even if we think we know what we're talking about, the topic that we're discussing, we always want to be able to learn and grow in every way possible. So we're so excited to have you.
Thank you. I've been going through your Instagram feed and I'm learning a lot.
Awesome. Sam, tell us who you are, what you do, and your role with Kalona SuperNatural.
Sure. So Kalona SuperNatural is an organic dairy company. We are based out of eastern Iowa, near the small town of Kalona, population 2,000. Our products go all over the country, even as far as Hawaii. We have milk, buttermilk, sour cream, whipping cream, eggnog, yay, lots of different things. And we're sort of known for being minimally processed, small family farms, but then being minimally processed. And we can talk about that in a minute. I'm the marketing director officially, but I spend time on farms. I get to learn a lot of things. I get to talk to a lot of people. When the kids tell me I have to do something silly, I'll go on a farm and pour milk on my head, whatever I got to do, I mean, this is serious stuff, right? Health, nutrition, the environmental consequences of farming. This is really serious stuff. But, way to hook people is to get them entertained first. And so I try to do a little bit of that.
That's amazing. I love that you're actually out in the field because there's so many people that, we hear being marketers and that's just their role, right? Their job is to just market for whatever company they're working for. But the fact that you're actually out there doing everything, you're learning, you're growing, and you're out there actually immersing yourself in the field is so amazing because you get to see every single day the growth that we're giving our world and kind of going back to what things were like 80 years ago, right? But and it's kind of sad, and we'll talk about that here in a second too, but it's just crazy that we've gotten so far away from everything, and what you guys are doing is trying to keep it how it's supposed to be. One of the biggest topics I want to talk about with you today is what is regenerative farming? And kind of tie this into Kalona and what beyond organic means, and the regenerative farming process and why we should focus on that practice of farming.
That's great. And I'm so glad you're asking that question. I see a lot of discussion about health and nutrition, gut health, microbes. The truth is that if you care about gut health, you have to care about soil health. And if you care about soil health, you have to care about regenerative farming, because that's what can rebuild what has been destroyed. So
Absolutely.
let's say there are sort of three types of farming: conventional, and I'll say organic, and then regenerative. Conventional is, of course, what's been used around the world. It's heavily mechanical. It's monoculture, corn, soybeans, right? One
Hmm.
plant planted across the ground, and heavily, and there's a heavy use of chemicals. There's also, of course, destroying the natural environment to create farmland in the first place. So what's happened around the world, especially over the last 50 years, as sort of industrial agriculture dominated the United States and then was spread to other countries all over the world by American corporations. They've destroyed entire ecosystems, right? Tons of the Brazilian rainforest has been slashed and burned in order to create farmland. And when you do that, you end up destroying the soil, which destroys the food and the quality of the food, which
Right.
destroys people's health and then destroys communities. There
Mhm.
are millions of people around the world who used to grow their own healthy food and now don't and can't. Also, then that just means at home, for example, our land and farms are not as resilient to extreme weather events. So we can talk about climate change and carbon sequestration and all the reasons and all the things about that. But it's pretty obvious there's a lot of droughts going on. Iowa in the next 20 years has been getting hotter and hotter. And for example, if the temperature is over 90 degrees, the ability of soil to grow plants decreases. So, and this has enormous consequences for farmers, just in terms of crops, but then also in terms of animal production. Right, when cows are really hot, they don't produce as much milk, and there's fertility issues. There's all kinds
Hmm.
of problems related to weather and climate. The second thing, though, is that back in the '60s, people got a little concerned about that, and so the organic movement started. Even before, let's go way back. Right, indigenous Americans were not polluting the ground with chemicals and fertilizers and tilling it with big tractors, right?
Right. Right.
So it wasn't new. It was like we're doing now, sort of returning to some old ways where the organic movement boomed. Then the government came in and put standards down.
Yep.
And organic is basically no herbicides, pesticides, or GMOs 3 years prior to harvest.
Hmm.
Right? So you can have torn up your soil and killed it and everything in it, and then transition to organic.
That's extremely important for our listeners to understand, is that just because it's organic now, like you said, it was just 3 years prior is what the organic label means. So there can be so much stripped out. That's why we don't have as many nutritious vegetables and fruits and all that, because we are not getting what we used to from the soil.
Exactly.
Hmm.
You're so smart. Even if you're not poisoning the food with herbicides, pesticides, it doesn't necessarily mean it's being grown in mineral rich soil. And
Hmm.
it doesn't mean it has the same kind of quality that it did 50 years. So, the other organic standard is sort of humane treatment of animals. So,
Hmm.
like, for example, our cows have to be on pasture a minimum of 120 days a year. 6 months, we exceed
Hmm.
that. Usually it depends on, really depends on the weather. So you got conventional, you have organic. At least you're not poisoning the environment and animals and
Hmm.
yourself, but you're not rebuilding. You're not creating something better. You're not restoring what was lost and what was very good and developed over tens of thousands of years.
Right.
So that's what the regenerative movement is really about.
Hmm.
When it's not being greenwashed, by
Right, and
companies.
there's a lot of that too.
You got it. There's always ways around, organic certification or anything anybody's ever doing, right? Or
Hmm.
labeling or whatever. There's always people cutting corners. But in general, the regenerative movement is the key to restoring not only sort of planet and food systems, but also communities.
Hmm.
And it really focuses, I guess, first in the environmental aspect, focuses on four things. So, soil health, right? Mineral rich soil with high levels of organic matter. The second would be biodiversity, a lot of different fungi, microbes in the soil, plants, animals, and insects, which are really important.
Hmm.
Conventional farming kills all that stuff, right? Organic farming doesn't kill it, but doesn't bring it back necessarily. And you
Right.
can still have an organic farm that's losing topsoil, that isn't biodiverse, that isn't building soil, that isn't retaining water to help it withstand drought and other climate disasters. And then the fourth thing is air health. I call it air health, right? But it's
Mhm.
carbon sequestration. right?
Hmm.
If you look at every spring in farming, when people start tilling, you see this massive release of carbon into the air. Carbon is good, by the way. We
Right.
like carbon. Carbon is the
Hmm.
basis of life. It's what plants pull out of the atmosphere and exchange in the soil for the things they need. It's really important. Now, we've
Right.
dumped a bunch of it through technology into the atmosphere,
Right.
but the key is not, some atmospheric scrubbers installed. The
Hmm.
key is restoring the health of the soil and plant life to bring it down into the soil and keep it there, which it did for tens of thousands of years. When, by the way, millions and millions more animals roam the earth.
Right.
Cows are the problem. Cows aren't really the problem. How they're managed is sort of a problem. And in
Right.
fact, cows and other big ruminants and other grazing animals are the key to soil health. If you left you with sort of like one thing, one thing here is that our food is less nutrient dense because the soil has been ruined, and you cannot restore the health of the soil and the health of the land without grazing animals. The people who
Absolutely.
think they're too well, okay, you could kill all the people and the earth would heal itself and the elk and the buffalo and deer and everything would come back.
Right.
But we don't really want that. There's way too much suffering associated with that. You can't just grow almonds in the desert and think that's gonna save save the planet, or just vegetables and think that that's going to save the planet if we all convert to vegetable based diets, because there's a lot of benefit associated with nutrient dense meat, dairy, etc., but those animals are the key to restoring the soil health, which is the only way to really get good nutritious vegetables, right?
Absolutely.
It's all a circle, and it's a circle that existed for tens of thousands of years before we came with tractors and chemicals and destroyed it. And now, in our arrogance, think we're gonna technology our way out of it. Like I'm a Star Trek fan. Like it'd be great if you could just create food out of molecules, but that's
Exactly.
not happening. That's not going to be the answer.
Exactly. I'm from a generation of a show called Phil of the Future, and
Ah,
they would just like they had this spray bottle where they would spray and like a meatloaf would come out. As a kid, I was like, "Whoa, that's awesome." And it's so crazy. I think about that so often now,
yeah.
and with all of this technology coming out and all of this plant-based meat and all of this stuff, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that is just it's terrible. There's no nutrients and it's all filled with inflammatory oils and just synthetic fillers, and it's like we just need to be eating the real thing and a good quality of the real thing, because that's going to provide our bodies with the bioavailable nutrients that it needs. The
Yeah.
earth was made how it was supposed to be made,
Yep.
and now we're just trying to redo it with technology, and it's so bizarre.
It's really sad too if you've been to other countries which used to, small towns flourished, people grew their own food. And then, through American foreign policy, we opened up in Central America, South America. We came in because of our big corporate interests, right? Wanting to grow lots of bananas or whatever,
Right.
and just put these guys out of business. And it was okay maybe for some of us who aren't paying attention and aren't concerned about what's going on in other parts of the world. But it's happened here now, right? American
Right.
farmland is being bought up by big multi-country conglomerates. China has bought tons of the pork processing facilities here. People
Right.
stress about Bill Gates buying up land. We don't know what he's doing with it.
Yeah.
We do know that what he's doing in India is devastating small farmers. So you have
Mhm.
this collusion of like big corporate, interests, and then big do-gooder interests that are not really doing good for people in the world. And it's pretty
No,
sad when you see it.
really.
20 years ago we had, and it's just progressing, right? We had a huge shutdown of farms, dairy farmers going out of business. People were committing suicide. It's still really happening. You should go down a road in Iowa and there would be 10 small farms. Now there's like one, because of big agriculture. And by the way,
Right.
farms in Iowa are not producing food for the rest of the world. They're not.
Right.
40% goes to ethanol production.
Wow.
What we need is to get back to small foods, small farms, local food distribution, and then those farms rebuilding the ecosystem.
Absolutely. So can you tell us, I'm driving down a road
Yep.
and I'm driving through Iowa, or I'm from Ohio, a
Yeah.
very small town, farmland, Ohio. But if I'm
Mhm.
driving down the road, what would be the difference of what I would see from a conventional farm and a regenerative farm?
Yep. So the first thing is, in the spring, if you see tilling,
Mm-hmm.
If you see tilling, and you'll never look at farms again, the tilling is doing a couple things, right?
Mm-hmm.
A, just digging it up, it's releasing clouds and clouds of carbon that's been stored there for years.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is it's like it's taking these, like in 1 teaspoon of soil, there's like 9 billion microbes. And
Mm-hmm.
we understand like what a small fraction do, right? It's just kind of like gut health. We understand some things, but there's a lot of interconnected parts and things that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
So when you till the soil, it's like taking like a city and shoving it up against the sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cooks it, everything bursts into flames, things die, right?
Yeah. Right.
That's first. Second, so if you see in the spring where there are crops but they're not tilling, what they're doing is they're using no-till practices. So that's real
Okay.
important. Second thing, plant diversity, right? Wherever you see one or two crops sort of rotated, that is an indicator that they're not providing the amount of plant diversity that is needed by the soil to regrow. So, for example, different plants do different things. Some have really deep tap roots that
Mm-hmm.
bring up moisture and minerals from way down low. Some have roots that expand and then decompose, which creates space for water. So they do different things. What you want to look for is cover crops. The more plants you have, just think of this, the more plants you have, you walk into any field, if you see like 2 or 3 plants kind of species and then space in between the plants where there's just like baked dirt,
Mm-hmm.
that's bad, right? The more crops you have, the more plants you have of all shapes and sizes, the more they're pulling sunlight out of solar energy out of the atmosphere, and the more they're pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, and the more they're doing other things. So look for fields that have a diversity of crops. A lot of times they'll look messy, right? We have this beautiful picture of rolling corn and beans, right? Like
Right.
the final thing, and this is the thing a lot of people key on with regenerative and grass-fed dairy and grass-fed beef, is livestock integration.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like plant diversity, right? Different animals and bugs do different things for the soil. If you drive and you see cows sort of wandering around a big area of a pasture, you can almost be sure that they're overgrazing it. If it looks
Mm-hmm.
like a golf course, you can be sure they're overgrazing it. They're
Oh, wow.
killing 1 or 2 different types of species that they prefer. They're
Mm-hmm.
allowed to graze all the way down to the soil practically, which means the roots don't have a chance to grow. So they're just going around killing the plant and stopping it from growing. And because of they're going around like that, they're stopping diversity from happening. If you look at a pasture and you see cows bunched into one area, and then
Mm-hmm.
the next day you see them move to another area and then another area, then you know that the farmer is wisely giving most of his pasture throughout the month or year the chance to recover. So if you don't bring cows back onto a particular plot of ground,
Mm-hmm.
that gives the plants a chance to fully regrow up here, and it gives the plants a chance to put down deep root systems, and
Mm-hmm.
it allows other plants to grow. Right? This is what happened in over tens of thousands of years when we had 60 million buffalo running around. I mean, you look
Mm-hmm.
at pictures; they were like just millions would swarm over the hills, and
Wow.
so were they belching and farting too much carbon into the atmosphere? No.
Right. Right.
Right? Right? They were packed together by the predators that were natural too.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would cluster, they'd stomp on the ground, they'd fertilize the ground, they'd break up the dry soil, and they would eat everything. And then they would move on and wouldn't come back for another year, giving the soil a full chance to recover. Now imagine if you just kind of like let them all stay there all year long, right? Deserts is what happens. The soil
Right.
gets depleted, it doesn't regenerate, and then you get deserts. I mean, there's something like 60 million, there's grasslands across the world, and 2/3 are degraded, and more turning into deserts all the time because we're not grazing animals correctly and we're
Mm-hmm.
using sort of conventional farming techniques on them.
Right. Thank you so much. That was such a good explanation. That's something like as much as I feel like I have done research on regenerative farming and I know too, like I'm learning so much from you and that's just so valuable. The fact that even though the cow is grazing on grass, it's not necessarily might not be the type of way that's going to help renew the soil in the way
That's
that it
right.
needs to be renewed, which is
Yep.
that's such valuable information. Okay, so for dairy, let's go into Kalona and
Sure.
what beyond organic means. And because obviously regenerative farming is great for the soil, great for the earth. So I kind of want to tie this into actual quality of dairy that we are consuming. Because as a gut health nutritionist, I work with a lot of clients who might have, autoimmune diseases. I personally do. And I was dairy free for like 6 years because you're told that it's like that's what's causing all these issues. Well, we know if you're listening to this, you have probably seen things on Instagram or you've done some research prior. And if not, conventional dairy, those cows are not treated well, they're not fed well, and they're fed a bunch of like inflammatory type of things. But I want you to kind of go into this, Sam, about how your Beyond Organic at Kalona, as opposed to conventional, is better for the human in general to consume as opposed to conventional dairy.
Yep. Yep. So anybody following along probably knows, well, they may know something about conventional dairy,
Right.
right? Where you get thousands of cows, they get packed into, no, we don't do that. You don't do that.
Yeah.
Thousands of cows get packed into feedlots. They get fed a really heavy diet of GMO grain.
Mhm.
Their energy gets jacked up, and then they produce tons of milk. So they produce, say, 3 times the amount of milk that a grass-fed cow will.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing people ask, why is it so expensive? Well, because they produce 3 times the amount of milk. Now, by doing that, of course, it puts the cow system under a tremendous amount of stress. Cows actually can digest grain. Grain
Mhm.
is seeds, right? And they have a biological mechanism for doing that, which
Mhm.
is needed in the wild, right?
Right.
When there are no grasses or there's a drought and there's just seeds on the ground.
Mhm.
So there is a biological mechanism for that. But when these CAFOs, these conventional dairy farms, give their cows 40% or more or whatever of their diet, their system is really revved up. When women are pregnant, sometimes their diets are different, right? They need more energy, or when they're nursing, they need more energy.
Mhm.
So, and that's okay, but you wouldn't give a pregnant mom like a ton of Hershey's bars and caffeine to jack up their system, and that's
Right.
all they ate all the time, right? That
Right.
would not be good. So that's
Mhm.
kind of what's happening to the cows in conventional dairies. End result, they last about 2 to 3 years on average, and then are turned into fast food burger.
Yeah. Well, and I've even heard how some of these cows are fed things like Skittles and stuff like that to help their production of their milk. And it's just with the sugar intake and all of that. And it's just insane what we can actually be consuming. I say that all the time that having some sort of animal product is better than not, but we also just have to be aware of the quality that we're
Yeah.
consuming and always vote with your dollar and make for sure that you're really doing the research and focusing on what kind of quality you're getting, because that's when people say like, oh, meat or dairy is a carcinogen and it's, this and it's that. And it's like, okay, there's a lot that we can unpack here, but it's also where you're getting the quality of your dairy and of your meat. It's just fascinating what goes on behind the scenes that we don't even see.
Yeah, and you said you know a lot of farmers, and I know a lot of farmers too.
Mhm.
So I don't want to pick on people. I don't want to pick on people here. People, whether they're farmers or people with their health, everybody's doing the best they can.
Right.
You have to make. Everybody has to make compromises. Usually, it's really hard to live, a really pure diet. You
Right.
know, consistent with your best values and best self. Like it's
Mhm.
hard, and I know that. And so, God bless anybody who's working on it and doing the best with what they have.
Exactly.
Everybody should feel okay about that. So, and even in grass-fed dairies, for example, 100% grass-fed, right?
Mhm.
The cow health is still an issue. The cows still need a lot of energy to produce milk. Lots of them get corn syrup.
Right.
But overall, these are good dairies. They produce, they're primarily grass fed and they treat their animals well. So, I don't want to pick on anybody for that either, too, necessarily.
I know.
So, well, let's go to grass fed, jump from conventional to sort of grass fed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Grass fed is where cows eat, 100% grass fed is where cows eat grasses,
Mhm.
forbs, legumes, other things on pasture 100% or the majority of the time. Now, grass fed doesn't necessarily mean organic.
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Organic doesn't necessarily mean regenerative.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really looking, what you really want is organic grass fed. Whether it's certified or not, you're looking for a farm that produces that, right? And just like I said, there's so much we don't understand, but we believe, and I know a lot of our customers believe, that natural is better,
Mm-hmm.
right? So grass fed has, I'm not supposed to, we got the FDA looking at us too. So
Yeah.
I can't go on about health benefits. That's why I'm really appreciative of people like you who invite us on and do educate people on this stuff.
Right.
But we think it's much better for lots of reasons. The most common one that is defensible with the science that's been done is increased levels of CLAs.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key thing. But I think there are lots of other measurements, if people were interested in doing the research and
Mm-hmm.
spending lots of money to do the research,
Right.
that would show that grass-fed, naturally fed cows produce higher quality meat and dairy in lots of ways.
Absolutely.
And right, from how you feel based on when you eat it.
Absolutely. Well, and the thing is too, with me saying that, like, I was dairy free for 6 years, I was so afraid of it. I would
Yep.
get I would, like, personally, I would get eczema, I would have flare ups, all these things. But once I actually started to do research on the quality of dairy and, get more raw dairy from farmers near me, and then finding Kalona in a store near me, it was completely a game changer because I reintroduced dairy and I felt totally fine. And then I also, like, I had no adverse symptoms from it. I also felt energized. I felt like I was satiated. There were times where I was just like, gosh, like, so I just need something, but I didn't know what I need. And now I'll just have, like, some cottage cheese or a glass of milk, or I make my homemade whipped cream with the Kalona heavy cream. And I would, yep, absolutely, right there. It's the best. It's like my baby because
Yeah.
that's what I get every time I go. I stock up when it's there because at my store it's always out. So I'm like, okay, if it's
Oh
there,
no.
I'm going to get a couple of these. But I genuinely couldn't believe that I could just, like, add in dairy after 6 years of not having it and again feel totally fine. And I grew up Italian. I grew up on bread
Oh
and
boy.
cheese. Yeah. And so it's like when
Oh
I found
no.
out, I know it was insane, but being able to just, like, be happy and add that in, it's amazing that the difference of what you guys provide, the quality that you provide compared to conventional dairy. Because when I do have conventional dairy, I notice some brain fog. I notice maybe I'll have a little bit more of, like, a eczema rash pop up or something along that sort. Yeah, you can definitely feel the difference. And a lot of people who don't think that they can have dairy just haven't had the right dairy for them.
I'd agree. I think there are four things here to think about. One is the cow's diet, right? If they're getting a lot of grains, if they're getting a lot of GMOs, and you have any kind of allergies to that stuff, then conventional is bad, right?
Mhm.
Grass fed is good, much, much better. And if it's organic, so there's nothing else associated with it, no GMOs, no herbicides, no pesticide wash, anything like that, that's probably even better.
Mhm.
But then there's another factor, and that is, well, two things. The first would be A2 cows versus not A2.
Mhm.
Lots of discussion about this, right? Lots of people do have an allergy towards non-A2 dairy.
Right.
60 to 80% of our herds are A2 cows. The whole industry is moving that way
Mhm.
because of that issue.
Right.
And so that's another reason why we think people can digest our milk better than most. And then the
Absolutely.
fourth is the way it's processed. So think about this. You have this, beautiful, beautiful little farm. The cows are eating 100% grass. It's organic. It's wonderful. And then it goes off to the bottling plant where two things happen. First of all, they ultra high temp pasteurize it at
Mhm.
280 degrees Fahrenheit,
Mhm.
sterilizing it. And secondly, they homogenize it. So the cream fat is placed under 3,000 pounds of pressure and smashed into millions and millions of pieces.
Wow.
That's when we say we're beyond organic, it's because of the nature of our farms, but then also the nature of processing. So
Right.
you've taken, it's like taking organic green beans, or like an apple, and you shove it in the microwave, for
Mhm.
15 minutes, right? It's probably not going to have the same properties that
Right.
it would if you just ate it raw,
Right.
right?
Yeah. So when you discuss your processing, that is mainly the Beyond Organic, what you guys call Kelowna Beyond Organic.
Mhm.
You're talking about the regenerative farming process.
Well, both, right? Yep. Yep. The
And the,
source of our food and
yep.
farms.
And then you're talking about the processing
Process.
of your dairy as well.
Yep. So
That's
we used to say
amazing.
minimally processed, and then I started going, well, this is like we're beyond organic. We're organic because lots of people look at organic, right? They want organic milk, but
Right.
we're organic. Plus, from small family farms that use regenerative farming practices,
Hmm.
and it's minimally processed, low temp pasteurization, the lowest temperature allowed by law, and non-homogenized. And then we try to avoid any kind of additives or stabilizers or anything
Right.
as far as much as we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. It's such a relief when you're able to find companies, because this is something that I talk a lot with clients about. And they're oftentimes in a food desert. They don't have access
Yeah.
to a
Yeah.
bunch of different types of good quality foods. But that's where I say you have to do your best. And none of this is to scare anybody or make anybody feel like less than because they can't have access to any of these products, but it's just to get everybody's wheels spinning on, this is something that we really need to start focusing on and being aware of just as a society and as a world. Because if we completely get away from all of this, I say this to a lot of people, the foods that we're eating today, they don't even seem real. What is organic today is kind of what foods were about like 80 years ago. So we're trying to eat organic, we're trying to eat locally sourced, like foods
Yep.
that are not sprayed with pesticides and stuff like that. And our grandparents were like, I just ate regular food, I'm fine. And I'm like, but what I'm trying to eat now is what you actually ate like back then, and it's just crazy how our food system, it's just upside down. It's completely upside down from where it used to be.
And
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 so
look at the research on autoimmune disorders.
exactly.
It's this stuff has skyrocketed since the 50s when we started, pumping our soils were ruined. We had to pump them full of herbicides, pesticides, and dump fertilized nitrogen based fertilizer on them, which is the stupidest thing, by the way, because the atmosphere is full of nitrogen. You just need
Yeah.
enough diversity of plants to drop down to
Right.
fertilize the soil.
Right. Well, and the thing is too, a bunch of research has been shown that glyphosate has been one of the contributors to leaky gut, which is one of the biggest causes of these autoimmune diseases that we're seeing in a lot of, gut dysfunction, skin issues, hormonal issues, metabolic issues, and a lot of it is tied back to the pesticides and herbicides and fungicides and all of that that's sprayed on our foods nowadays,
Yeah.
because it's just wreaking havoc on the gut, which is, it's just sad. That's not to scare you, but it's just to be mindful, because oftentimes people think nowadays, like we're so in this diet culture mindset where if we work out, we're healthy. We can eat whatever we want, but as long as we work out, we're fine. And that's oftentimes the individual who is seemingly healthy at this point in their life and they're not having any issues. Well, a lot of these people who are having these autoimmune issues, these gut issues, these skin issues, hormonal issues, more metabolic issues, and they're not understanding like where all of this is stemming from, that's where like I work with them and I say, let's
Yep.
look at the quality of foods that you're eating. But if you're in a food desert, like I have multiple clients who are in these food deserts, you can only do what you can do. And that's not to say like don't buy anything, don't eat anything,
Yeah.
because you want to do your best. There's also different resources like these different food delivery systems
Mhm.
that can also get you better quality foods, things like that. You can order these good quality foods online, but also talking to your local farmers, because a
Yep.
lot of local farmers, it's really interesting because back in Ohio, my mom was talking to somebody at, I think it was the local farmers market, or sorry, it was a strawberry farm nearby, and they were telling them that yeah, we don't spray anything on it. We consider ourselves organic
Yep.
and technically beyond organic with their farming system and all of that, but they just don't have the label. So that's one of the biggest things is like if you talk to your farmers, if you talk to your local, anybody who has like a local small garden or anything, it's one of the easiest ways to get better quality foods. Even if it's not perfect, at least you're doing the best you can. But talking with your farmers, because they could be potentially doing these practices, but it is so expensive to get the label
Sure.
from, you know, from the FDA and all that to be able to say that this is what you are. So that's one thing that we can do. We can always do our best, but it's amazing to have products like you guys, Kelowna, in stores where if you do have the access to that, being able to just be like, this is a company I trust and I respect, and I know that they're doing the best that they can for their consumers. And yeah, you're a company, but you're not just trying to make money. You're trying to provide the best quality of what we are consuming to your consumer, because you genuinely care about your consumers and their health and not just making a dollar on it. And that's what
Yeah.
I really appreciate, is knowing that there are companies like you can walk into the door, you know exactly where it is in that section, and hopefully we can get you guys in more stores too. But it's just amazing that you can walk into a store, know that you trust that company, and grab what you need.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your work with people on their health. The pollution of their food, the pollution of food will continue to happen unless consumers start to demand regenerative.
Right.
Because if we don't, eventually everything just gets more processed. They'll just keep pumping more chemicals and ruining the soil in order to keep production up. And it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable for not only the rest of the world, but now even impacting on places like Iowa, which have, really rich topsoil.
Right. So how would you tell somebody they could get involved with helping advocate for regenerative farming?
There are lots of people doing regenerative work called regenerative work, but I would go look at the Savory Institute. The Savory Institute is probably best well known for a particular kind of grazing management
Hmm.
that restores the soil. And I really believe that's the key. We can't plant enough trees in the desert and water enough trees in the desert to regrow the soil there. But we could, with animals, renew the soil and turn those back into grasslands and then fertile land for both grazing and crop production. So go look at the Savory Institute's Land to Market program. On the nutrition side, I'm a fan of Diane Rogers too, who talks a lot about the density of the nutritional benefits of meat.
Okay.
Look for the Savory Institute Land to Market program. We've had a bunch of people trained. Our farmers are doing those kind of practices. And this is a little complicated, but theirs is the best system for looking at the ecosystem in a holistic way.
Hmm.
Right? In science and sometimes in our lives, we think like, okay, like if my kid's misbehaving, with a kid at school, like if I just fix that little issue, right?
Right.
Or if I study something associated with human in just, I isolate that variable and then I can tell something from that. Not really true, right? So many things are interconnected. It's
Hmm.
sort of I graduated from Yale, you know, the arrogance of intellectual thinking and technology is a problem. It keeps us from seeing things in relation to each other. And the
Hmm.
Savory Institute is really good about looking at ecosystems, how they're connected, and the impact on communities. That's just really important. It's a little complicated, but it's really important. So I'd start there. Look
Yeah,
for Alan
absolutely.
Savory's TEDx talk. It,
Okay.
it it was the one thing that inspired me, looking at the world and what's going on in the world and stuff and my own health, etc. It was the one thing that really inspired me and gave me some hope for the planet, for animals, for the environment, human health,
Hmm.
and human communities and civilizations.
Yeah, that's amazing. The biggest and the most important takeaway from that is the fact that we're trying to regenerate the earth and regenerate the soils and really
Yeah,
make for sure that the animals have quality life, and while they also have quality life, that they're giving back to the earth and everything's just renewing itself in the way that it needs to be.
exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so one thing that found super interesting, I found on your guys' Instagram, and I think you were the one who was talking about it, was
Probably.
your your sell by date versus
Yes,
expiration date. And I found it fascinating. So if you would talk about that a little bit.
sure. So thank you for asking that question. Confusion over sell by date and expiration date accounts for about 20% of food waste.
Wow.
Think of the millions of pounds of food that get thrown away.
Yeah.
that could be going somewhere like into us or, down the food bank or wherever.
Right.
So the sell by date or best by date are not related to food safety.
Okay.
People often think that, but they're not related to food safety. In fact, you almost won't, on dairy, you won't almost ever see an expiration date.
Hmm.
You'll typically see a sell by date or a use by date. And all that date means is that is our estimate of when food is at its peak quality. It does not mean that it shouldn't be sold. It does not mean that you can't consume it. It just means it's an estimate that we're forced to put on there by the government that indicates when it's at peak quality.
Wow.
Right? People get confused about that.
Yeah, I would have had no idea.
Yep.
That's amazing.
So when you get it, there's a difference, usually based on the level of pasteurization. So, raw milk will spoil faster, right? Pasteurized milk will spoil slower. But there's sort of 3 levels of pasteurization. One level people should look for is VAT or batch pasteurization. That's the lowest possible temperature allowed by law. In that case, it needs to be refrigerated and it will generally spoil a little quicker. But that means it's fresher. That means it hasn't been overly processed and all the goodness sterilized out of it. The next level is HTST. That's a little bit higher pasteurization. You'll see that for like cultured products usually. And then there's ultra high temp pasteurization, which I talk about all the time. Drive me nuts. Never UHT, right? It's sterilized at 280 degrees, packaged in antiseptic packaging, and can be just stored in your pantry, for weeks, months, without refrigeration. The only reason UHT milk is refrigerated, the only real reason, is because if you took those organic milks that you see, those other organic milks, competitors that you see out of the fridge, put them on the shelf, nobody would buy them.
Right.
Because people would rightly think that something maybe was a little wrong with them.
Right.
And I need to be nice and respectful here, but I just think it's awful to you have this perfect, amazing food and then you just kill it. So by the way, so it can travel all the way across the country and make more money for the stockholders and shareholders. Now, I won't name competitors, but if the stockholders and shareholders are small family farms, that are trying to survive, I don't want to fault them for that. If they're big multinational conglomerates, that are answering to stockholders. And here's the other thing. They do that for shelf space. Because if a company, there are some dairies are also funded by venture capitalists. And what are they interested? Are they interested in the small farms or nutritionally dense food? No, they're interested in raising a bunch of money, spending millions of dollars on advertising to dominate store shelves, to put the little guys, the small producers, the small farmers out of business, and then they sell out, they jack up their prices and make more money, or then they can sell out to somebody bigger. There is another company, I won't mention the name, that has a sour cream on the shelf. And they're good people, they're good guys. But they just raised $60 million in venture capital that is going to paying stores and advertising in paying stores to get on their shelves and dominate their shelves. And that squeezes every little guy, every local company, every small company like us out, except for the fact that some people like you and people listening are passionate about what we're doing. There is no way we could compete without your guys' support.
Yeah.
So back to sell by, use by. So if you get our products, and most dairy products can go at least 5 to 7 days unopened. If you keep it in a cooler place, it's likely to last longer. So there was a study that showed by dropping the temperature of the refrigeration from 43 degrees down to 39 degrees, lengthen that by 9 days. So, and even if you store it in the back of your fridge where it's cooler as opposed to the door, it's likely to last longer.
That's fascinating.
Yep. If you've opened milk, doesn't matter whether it's been UHT sterilized or low temp pasteurized like ours or raw, right? Bacteria gets in and immediately starts to go bad.
Right.
Now, if you drink it out of the bottle, it's going to get more bacteria and go bad a lot quicker. The real answer is to smell it and taste it. And you can tell if it's going bad with one thing about our milk, right? Because it's low temp pasteurized and grass fed and minimally processed, it definitely has a different kind of taste and feel to it. And some people, when they're new to it, they're like, this is different.
Yeah.
If you're from another country where they never do pasteurization, or from a farm where you had raw milk, you'll be like, wow, this reminds me of growing up. My
Mm-hmm.
abuelita's kitchen back in
Mm-hmm.
India. Like we get those kind of questions, comments all the time.
Right.
So if you're a first time user, it will taste a little different from the sort of water taste of like a conventional milk, or
Right.
the sickly sweet taste of a milk that's had all its sugars cooked.
Mm.
So you might experience that a little bit differently. And then because we're not homogenized and the cream rises to the top, you're
Yeah.
definitely going to see like cream. It's almost like a butter if
Mm-hmm.
it's sat a long time at the top and you need to shake it up. The good news is that if your milk has spoiled a little bit, you could use it anywhere you use buttermilk or sour cream. 80
I
years ago, nobody threw it out, right? They just cooked
exactly.
it. They just cooked it and used it as a
Exactly. And that's something I use up all my dairy when I have it usually, but that's something I've been wanting to do is like make my own sour cream. It's such a cool process knowing that it's actually really funny because I was talking earlier about how I use the heavy whipping cream to make my own whipped cream. And there was a colleague of mine and she was making whipped cream and walked away for too long and she came back and was like, I have butter. What is happening? And it was just so funny. She posted about
Yeah.
it on her Instagram. I had like tears in my eyes because it was so funny because about like a week earlier I had said, "Don't walk away." Like I was showing my community how to make whipped cream, and I was like, "Don't walk away because you'll have butter." And then she did that, and I was like, "I'm assuming you did not see my video." And she's like, "I did not see your video." It was so funny, but it's just amazing, like what you can do, and you can even. I see that you guys have shared where you can just shake it up in a jar and it becomes butter that way, and it's
Yeah.
really cool. You don't need to waste your food. You can turn it into something else, which is pretty amazing.
Doing stuff like that also introduces kids, in a nice way. Like we've got our chocolate milk,
Hmm.
which is unbelievable. It's like liquid ice cream, but it has way too much sugar. If there was a health thing, I would say the sugar content's the main thing.
Right.
But it's a way to get them into it. They get Kelowna, and they get used to that full mouthfeel of non-homogenized and
Hmm.
low temp pasteurized milk, and then they're like, wow, okay, I could try the other milk.
Hmm.
And pretty soon they're eating, kids are eating organic cottage cheese
Exactly.
for breakfast. Go figure.
Exactly. Well, and it's amazing how when I was not eating or drinking dairy, if I was not consuming dairy whatsoever, and I was almost afraid of it, and because some my family they had some health issues running our family too, and so I would tell them like, "Oh, drink this like nut milk, or drink this, or drink that," and it was like now after I learned like everything I did, I'm like, no, I'm just joking. Like everything I said
I
those
know.
6 years is completely wrong. And especially because I was drinking canola oil while I was drinking these nut
Yeah.
milks and stuff and all of
Yeah.
these synthetic nutrients and everything that wasn't actually helping my body out and in turn was actually contributing more to my autoimmune
Yeah.
issues. It's just insane that like what it's there's so much information. That's a whole other podcast, but oh my gosh. When we are talking about the farms that you guys utilize, the smaller farms,
Yep.
where are those typically found? Like if you're going around, is it close to Kelowna?
Yeah.
Are all of
Oh
your
yeah.
small farms around there?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you drive through Iowa, Nebraska, just corn, soybean, corn, soybean, corn, soybean.
Mhm.
Well, if you come to Kelowna, which
Mhm.
is a population 2,000 outside of Iowa City, as a
Mhm.
point of reference, you have corn, soybean, and then you have all this patchwork of green.
Mhm.
And it's where these Amish and Mennonite families have had farms for it's going back 150 years. They were organic before there was organic standards,
Right.
and I've been doing some regenerative stuff since people started getting excited about it. They're ecological oases.
Mhm.
There's probably there's it changes a little bit, but there's about 35 right around Kelowna. We've got a few others down in Bloomfield, Missouri, one in Illinois, a couple a little bit farther north. But generally, we're one of the few areas where there are dairy farms that are using regenerative practices and organic practices. You'll find in Wisconsin and some in the Northeast too. But it's been real hard for a lot of those to survive.
Right.
And if you check the news, a lot of them are going out of business as the big companies that control them are just like, okay, we're not going to send a truck all the way out to your little farm anymore
Right.
because it costs too much. So we're just going to dump you and dump some other guys and just go with the ones closest. And by the way, the quality of your milk doesn't matter so much because we're UHT sterilizing it.
Right. Exactly.
It all,
Well,
it all gets dumped in and then sterilized. So who cares, if it's super grass fed or grown on a farm that uses regenerative farming?
Exactly. And I think the biggest thing too about like just being individuals who support farmers just in general is the fact that like obviously we care about the person, we care about the farmer, we care about the family, and we know that they're
Yeah.
trying to make a living for
Yeah.
themselves and their families and do what's best and also do what they know. Like that's what they've kind of grown
Yeah.
up with and that's what they've been taught. But it's also like we care about you as an individual and your skills, and the your skills can be put to even further use by being
Yes.
able to help get back to where we need to be with regenerative farming. I respect farmers and just anybody in that field so much,
Yeah.
but we also know the importance of the regenerative farming practice and this movement that hopefully can be pushed even more because again, like you said, these Amish and Mennonite families who've been doing it for so long
Yeah.
and they
Decades.
just never got away from it. And it's like that's what it used to be. That's where we kind of need to go back to. And I feel like there's also a movement of more homemakers and homesteaders that I'm seeing now. And
Very cool.
I think it's amazing because we're really seeing the negative impact a lot of these companies and people in general just want to make so much money and want to like almost just take over the world. It has been having such a negative impact on our health and our well-beings, and so many people are realizing that nowadays and they're wanting to come back and be able to rely on themselves and their community and not so much rely on these big
Yeah.
companies that aren't going to be able to help them in the times of need.
What's going on in the regenerative space, where you
Mhm.
have multi-species grazing all kinds of grazing on all kinds of land. You have pigs rooting around orchards. You know, you have your CSA going. You're doing something for the planet. There's
Right.
always something interesting going on. It's fascinating, intellectual, and science work. You're not just like, okay, big corporation says I need to spray X nitrogen and borrow money to pay them, and that's it. Like, it's
Right.
really fascinating, exciting stuff. And really, aside from sort of Native Americans have been doing it for a long time, sort of little communities like Amish, and then sort of environmental like hippies, the old
Mhm.
folks, the people we see in the space, they're young and they're excited and they're going into
Right.
like places in California that are desert and implementing this stuff, and
Right.
the ground comes back to life. Even in the Bible, in the Old Testament, land of milk and honey,
Right.
right? There's beautiful stories of it was not all desert,
Right.
right? Libya,
Mhm.
total desert, one of the hottest, most desert places on earth,
Mhm.
was grasslands where
Yeah.
they were growing food and had animals.
Wow.
Now it's desert.
That's
It's coming to America slowly. If we don't do something different, and what can we do differently? Well, we can get excited about farming, excited about agriculture, excited about animals,
exact.
excited about our health. It all
Yeah.
works together pretty well. And you know
Awesome.
what? You feel better when you live consistent with your values.
Exactly. But with your dollar, make for sure that who you're supporting, where you're getting your food and produce or whatever you're purchasing, that you know where it's coming from, that you know that you can support the integrity of that company and just really it goes along with your values and your morals in general. So,
In the latest farm bill, finally the Congress, has done something good in the farm bill, and they put a lot more into transitioning to organic and regenerative.
mhm.
We get all the politicians through here. So, every 4 years they all come through, we hear all the proposals,
Yeah.
and the idea is to find proposals that are not just in the pocket of the chemical companies.
I really appreciate you coming on. This has been so amazing. We've learned so much. And again, like I said, like even if you feel like you know so much about it, I've read the book A Cow Save the Planet. It is
Yep,
very
yep,
much about regenerative farming. That's a great resource. If you want to get into the science of it, it teaches a
yep.
lot about all of that. I love being able to have this type of opportunity to have a conversation with somebody, especially somebody like you from Kelowna. Sam, it's been a pleasure and we've had such a great conversation and have learned so much. So, the way I like to end my
Uh-huh.
podcast, I want to do some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Okay,
Does
let
it
me.
involve organic eggnog, which is on shelves now?
Okay, is that a new product? Because I actually wanted to circle back to that because I
Ooh,
love eggnog.
there you
That is
go.
amazing. That better be in the South Carolina Earth Fair.
I need to tell people down there to start going to Earth Fair. If you want our products in your store, go to our website and fill out the store request form. Absolutely. I've sort of put that all over the place because we're really focusing on that. Okay. When it comes in, we'll tell you, go talk to the dairy manager because they respond to customer requests. Mm-hmm. If they won't carry it in the store for whatever reason, they can probably special order cases of it for you. So you can get cases of whipping cream, whatever. Share with your friends.
I mean, I will.
And then we work on the back. We work on the back end, just like we need policymakers to go, we need regenerative farming. Here's how we're going to support it from a funding perspective and legislative perspective while we have consumers demand it. Unless we get both happening, it doesn't work.
Okay. So, rapid fire questions. Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
If you could have any superpower, what would be your superpower?
Oh, gosh. Oh. You want an honest answer?
Honest.
I'd be a better dad.
Oh.
Yeah, I'd be a better dad. I've got 4 kids. One has Down syndrome. He's 25. Mm-hmm. We adopted our 18-year-old who just sent off to college. Mm-hmm. We got a 12-year-old, and then 13 years later, we adopted the half brother of our daughter that we adopted. So the county Valley called me and said, we got this woman came in, she had a baby, meth, drugs, homeless, drunk, had another baby. We put her name in the system. And it looks like you adopted her first baby 13 years ago. You want another one?
Wow.
And I said, I'm 45. Are you kidding me?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I've got to stay home with our kids while they're babies. My wife's a doctor, but I wish I was just more focused on them and do with them what my dad would do with me when we grew up on the farm. Yeah. And I want to live on a farm all the time, but my wife doesn't let me.
Oh, I'm the same way. Honestly.
Was that too personal? That was too much.
No, I love that. That's one of the reasons why I started a podcast is because I enjoy having deep conversations with people and not so much as surface level conversations.
Easier to fuss about and talk about what's going on in the world than it is sometimes to handle very personal, important situations in our own lives.
Absolutely. That's 100% correct. Sometimes it's easier to put your focus elsewhere and not deal what's going on internally. So I appreciate your response. That's super. I am sure that you are an amazing father, but I feel like I'm not a parent yet, but I believe that probably most parents think the exact same thing. All right. Have you taken any personality tests?
Yes.
Have you taken like Myers-Briggs?
Yep. ENFJ, I think.
ENFJ. So explain that for a second.
Extrovert, obviously. Intuitive. I feel things. Judicious or judgmental. Is it judgmental or judicious? Where, you form pretty strong opinions about what's right and wrong in the world. ENFJ. F is for feeling, I think. Mm-hmm. I'm artistic. I feel things pretty deeply.
Gotcha. I'm an INFP, so introverted, but also like feel the things and all that too. Cool. Okay, so one meal that you could eat for the rest of your life every single day.
Oh gosh, it's hard to beat pizza. Just is really hard.
Yeah, pizza.
The bread, the meat, the cheese, all in one.
Yeah.
Throw vegetables in there too. It's just gooey.
Side of milk.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a Dr. Pepper addict for years. God help me. I'm a wreck. You probably can't tell, but I'm a mess. I need a 20-minute consultation. I know I saw that on your website.
Yeah.
Everybody should go there, by the way, and get some help.
Absolutely. You're a Dr. Pepper fanatic, pizza lover. So no, it's totally fine. No judgment here because
it's not too late. It's not too late to change your health habits and to become inspired about saving the earth.
Absolutely. Never too late for either of those. I appreciate it. All right. Last question. 2 things you'd take with you on a deserted island if you knew you were going to be stuck there and could take 2 things.
I'd just say cow. A goat. A goat would eat everything. It wouldn't last. Fire, maybe. I don't know. I watch those shows sometimes, like Stranded. I could do this, and maybe not.
That's
Naked
so funny.
and Afraid? I don't think so.
I know. I used to love Survivor, and I hadn't watched it in 12 years. And so I just watched a couple seasons. It was on Paramount Plus, and I watched a couple seasons, and I'm like, I could probably do this. I mean, if I had to, I probably could, but would I voluntarily? Probably not. Well, Sam, thank you so much for being on today. It has been a pleasure. We've learned so much. You guys, if you have not been able to get your hands on Kalona, go on their website, request it to be in one of your stores in your town or nearby town. I personally have to drive like 15 minutes to go get it into a different town, but I will drive because it's not that far. I just listen to a podcast and I love getting my Kalona. So we appreciate all your knowledge on regenerative farming. Thank you so much for being here today, and hopefully we're able to talk soon.
Thank you. And if you need some help, if you're frustrated about what's going on in the world and the environment, go look up the Savory Institute. It'll give you some help.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Perfect. And all this will be in the show notes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Live Well with Josie podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to leave a comment and review, as we would greatly appreciate it. Also, please remember that nothing discussed here today is to be used as medical advice to diagnose, cure disease, prescribe, or treat illness. These conversations are simply to be used as educational resources for living a life with intention. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Live Well with Josie, and my website, www.livewellwithjosie.com. See you next time, friend, and until then, stay intentional.